All right, well, welcome to the live. I appreciate you stopping by. I'm going to show you some really, really cool artifacts today. I'm going to show you a couple really cool things. So thanks for tuning in. Like I said, I'm just going to give it just a second because I know some people are tuning in, and we'll get started. So let's see. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this. Let me bring this over. Okay. So, and I'll show this up closer. This is a whale oil lamp. And let me get you a little bit closer so you can see some of the details on it. I don't know if you can see that there. You can see it's and I'll sort of turn it around a little bit here. It's a whale oil lamp that was owned by James Monroe, and he actually had a pair of them, and I'll bring out this other one too. Let me put this over here. I'll bring this up. Beautiful whale oil lamp. So that's what this is. And this is actually, this is cast brass. Hey, Andrew, how are you? This is a cast brass whale oil lamp owned by James Monroe. And you can see, and I'll show it to you. There's a couple of interesting things about it. And the first thing I'll say is like, well, so how do you know it's a whale oil lamp? What's the deal with that? How do you know? Well, there's a couple of sort of distinguishing factors about whale oil lamps that are pretty cool. One is that there was actually a metal sort of wick stand or wick cover that would go down into the reservoir here. Can you see this? So this is the bulb or the reservoir where the oil would go, the whale oil would go. Hey, Nedra. And so it would have a metal stem that would go down into the reservoir. And the reason for that is because whale oil was a little bit thicker. It was a little bit more dense than other oils that were used for lighting at the time. And so the metal stem would help heat that up. So it helps sort of keep that reservoir a little bit more viscous, a little bit more fluid to draw up into the wick for the light. Another thing that was sort of a distinguishing factor of the whale oil lamp was a lot of the early ones, they didn't have glass shades. They didn't do that, although later on they did that a little bit. And another distinguishing factor is a lot of times they would have double wicks. They would have two sort of wick stems that would come out, and that would add more illumination to the room. So you ask yourself, okay, so what? What's the big deal? Well, whale oil lamps, first of all, for those that are just tuning in, this one actually belonged, oh, hey, James, or hey, Jay, some of them actually, this one actually belonged to James Monroe. And you think, well, so what's the significance of an artifact like this? Well, if you think about it, the whale oil industry was kicking huge in the United States in the 1800s, right? And it dates back, some people say all the way to the 1600s in the U.S., but certainly from the 1700s, the whale oil industry was going. The industry was going, and in James Monroe's time period, especially around the late 1820s, the heart of it was really kicking up in New Bedford, right up in the New England area. In fact, up in New Bedford around 1820, when Monroe was still alive, they had around 200 whaling ships that would go out. So that was a pretty significant thing. And you think about this, it's like, well, okay, but in 5 years, more or less, like by about the mid 1830s, they had double that amount. They had almost 400 whaling ships going out of New England, in the New Bedford area, Nantucket, places like that. And you say, well, well, so what? What's the big deal with, the whale oil industry doubling? Well, if you think about it, that's very reflective of what was happening at that time. And what do I mean by that? Well, really with whale oil, or the whaling industry yielded sort of three sort of major products from it. As distasteful as that seems to us now, that's how it was. And, the first one is whale oil, which was made from just rendering the fat down from whales, just taking it down and rendering it down, trying it down. Then the second sort of big industry was from the spermaceti oil, which comes directly from the head of the sperm whale itself. And that was interesting because that was a little bit more refined and it was a little bit more expensive. And that would have been more likely what was used in James Monroe's whale oil lamp. So you had that sort of second, the spermaceti whale head oil that was more refined. And the other thing that was very popular about it, it's like, why whale oil? Why not other things? Well, whale oil was also relatively odorless in comparison to other oils. And oh, Hayden, how are you? It's good to see you. And so it was relatively odorless in comparison to other oils, and it burned a good, nice bright light, and so it was very popular if you could afford it. And so that, that's one of the things that kicked in. And then the third product that would come from whales was, of course, the whale bone. It's like, well, what would you use whale bone for? Well, they use it for all kinds of things. They use it for accessories. They used it, but in particular, something that a lot of people can relate to is they use it for corset bones. If the line of the corset to keep it in, and corsets today are popular for costumery and cosplay and things like that. And back then they would use whalebone in order to ridge up the corset. So there were sort of three big industries that was kicking in. And so why did it double then, or why did it increase so much from James Monroe's time? And so, like I said earlier, in James Monroe's period, in the late 1820s, there maybe been about 200 ships. It was a pretty solid industry going. But then by the mid 1800s, about 1846, when it reached its peak, you're looking at maybe over 700 whaling ships going out. And the reason for that is because, right, the Industrial Revolution was kicking in, and you had more industry, more machinery, and the whale oil, the first one I talked about, the first segment, not the spermaceti whale oil, but just the whale fat oil was used for lubricants, for machinery, and things like that, and so for industrial uses. So you had a real increase in presence of the whale industry. And I'll just show you this here. This sort of pops off. Sort of cupping. You can see sort of the wick. I think you can see that kind of kicking in there. And yeah, and they would fill it in here, and it would burn fairly cleanly, fairly brightly, and that was a thing. And like I said, today it's distasteful to us today, and it actually started going in decline. Pretty much why you think it would. This is sort of an interesting fact. By the last whale oil, or the last whaler, to go out of New England was in 1927. And so it actually was still sort of hanging on until 1927. That was the last official whaler to go out. And it declined rapidly, exactly why you would think, because of advances in technology. You had gas lamps, you had synthetic oils, synthetic lubricants, and then, of course, later on, the big killer for all this was electricity kicking in. So, by the late 1880s, the whale oil lamp was just pretty much gone. Oh, casting, Andrew, you're asking what casting method was used. Well, yeah, you're right. This is a cast. This is not hand forged. Well, since it's not intricately carved, they may not have used lost wax casting in order to get that detail. But it's possible they could have used some sand casting to do it and mold it out, create the mold, and then put it in sand casting and create it that way. Obviously they wouldn't use something like plaster Paris because that would have been too brittle for something this hot, whatever's going in metal. But yeah, so there it is, James Monroe's whale oil lamp, a artifact of a bygone era. It's like I've said in previous live casts that a lot of these artifacts that we see can more or less be related to today, but then some that we could see just aren't at all. There's really no comparable, and this is sort of an interesting one. This is one that's lost in time. We're probably not going to see this a whole lot again, which is the whale oil lamp. Okay, so let me put this over here just a little bit to the side. Let's see if I can get this, and then I'll bring out the other big gun. Let me see. Okay, and I'm going to hopefully be able to show this to you with, there it is, with the I know it's not a very good angle, and I wish I had a better angle for you, but I wanted to show this to you. This is James Monroe's court suit, and I'll sort of hold it up a little bit closer so you can see it just a little bit closer. You can see it. Okay, can you see this with the light? I'm going to sort of just move it around just a little bit so you can see closer. James Monroe's court suit. And what do I mean by that? Well, this suit was owned and worn by James Monroe, and it is made of silk velvet. See this up here? I'll sort of bring it up just a little bit if I can. Sort of pull it up. It's made of silk velvet. It's very beautifully done, very beautifully decorated. And James Monroe, it's very possible that he would have worn this over in his diplomatic missions when he was overseas. And when I say court suit, it's because, well, when he was over in France, he would have attended the court of Napoleon. Napoleon was one of the guys. Yeah, right, Honor. Check this out. I mean, this is amazing. So this is very possible that he wore this in the court of Napoleon, and it's very fine. It's very elegant. I'll see if I can get it closer to you again. It's very refined, very elegant, and it's black. If you could see, and I don't know if you could see in the light, but there's little tiny lighter silver-like thread sort of going through and highlighting and giving it a little sort of glisten to it. And what's interesting about that is that in these fluorescent lights here that you see, you're seeing this fluorescence. You know, it looks fine, but it really would have sparkled and popped out in the candlelight. That's when it really would have found its footing, and it would have been really spectacular. Something that I find super fascinating about this is, well, the suit itself, but the buttons. Let me see if I can get it up there again. Okay. So the button, and I'll show you a close-up of it. These are called cut steel buttons. And I love these because if you see these, they sort of sparkle a little bit, right? And they glisten like as if they're gemstones or rhinestones or something like that. They're actually, it's cut steel. And that's endlessly fascinating to me. So what's going on with that? Why the cut steel? Why is that happening? Well, cut steel jewelry, I'm sorry about shaking the camera there. The cut steel jewelry actually dates back, you know, some people say to the 1600s, but there is evidence of cut steel jewelry in 1720s in Oxfordshire in England, where they were making some then. And cut steel jewelry is exactly what it sounds like. It's made of cut steel, and what the guy would do was, the craftsman, he would cut a piece of steel, a thin plate of steel, and then he would weld, or he would rivet on their individual facets. What am I talking about? I actually have a picture here. Where did it go? So I thought it was endlessly fascinating. I took my little nerd glass and I did a close-up of the button. So this is actually a close-up. Can you see that? It's actually a close-up of the button, this right here. So this is magnifying up. And if you look at it, check that out. These are all individually riveted on there. Each one by the craftsman. And not just that, not just individually riveted on, but they're faceted like diamonds. Can you see that? Can you see where they have different facet faces on there? I mean, how cool is that? So what that's doing is that's creating a sparkle effect of diamonds and jewelry without the expense of diamonds and jewelry. It's really pretty cool. And this was a popular thing to wear. And, you know, some people say that that the popularity was because of, I'm probably not going to pronounce this right, of subsidiary laws, where you can, by law, only nobles or people of certain rank can wear certain jewelry and things like that. And it was a way to help distinguish the classes, and a way to sort of keep that in check. And so cut steel jewelry is sort of a way to get around that. But really, one of the things that really popularized it was Napoleon's second wife, Marie Louise. His second wife, he actually presented her with a whole set of jewelry that was cut steel. And once that happened, you know, of course, the folks would be like, oh, wow, well, cut steel jewelry that is okay to wear because Napoleon's wife can wear it. Therefore, it's all cool and it was very fashionable, very trendy. You see this sort of going in well into the 1800s, but then by the mid 1800s, cut steel jewelry started. And again, here's the photo of it. Cut steel jewelry started to go out of fashion. You see, it became a little bit cheaply made, a little bit not quite as cool, and it sort of died off by the late 1800s. But in Monroe's era, obviously, this was very prominent. It was a very kind of cool thing to do. And again, I hope I'm not sounding like a broken record here, but it's just very reflective of James Monroe himself, and not just James Monroe, but the American aesthetic. And I said this last time, and I'll just say it again, that what I mean by that is that if you look at this court suit, if you look at it, and I wish my camera was better, I wish you could see it a little bit better, I know, I apologize for that. But if you can see it, it's beautiful, it's elegant, and it's well done, but it's not over the top, right? It's not over the top. It's not crazy that you're not seeing like crazy embroidery going up and down. You're not seeing this sort of ridiculous flamboyant thing happening, which was true of a lot of the court suits of back in the day. And so you're seeing this keeping up with Napoleon. That's true, Andrew. Oh, hey, Matthew. Hey, Roman. How are you? Um, and so that was very, very in line and very, very symbiotic with Monroe's aesthetic. And not just Monroe's aesthetic, but sort of the American aesthetic in a lot of ways. And like I said last week, that what I mean by that is that America was coming into its own around this time period. You're talking about 1800, around there, 1800, 1805, in that period, and well past that as well. It was coming into its own as far as finding its style, finding its look, finding its aesthetic. And this court suit is saying, just like Monroe would say, that I am refined and I belong here. I belong in the room with the court, but I'm not one of you. I am U.S. And I said this last week, and I'm repeating myself, but it's true. And this is very reflective, not only of the sword that I showed last week, but also of this suit itself. And again, I'll show it to you close up. You can see this. Okay. Try to give it a little bit past there. Silk velvet. Oh, that's another thing. You know how they make velvet back? They have two different patterns overlaying with this machine, and then they cut it and slice it in half so that you have, and the exposed end, that's what that velvet feel is. When you feel the velvet has a very distinguished feel, that's what that is the threads that are cut from the other side. Isn't that cool? That's kind of cool. All right. I'll show you one more thing here, and I'll see if I can get this big fella over all the way. Sorry, court suit of Napoleon. You're going to go over here. Or let's go court suit of James Monroe. Okay. I'm going to show you this. Okay. Does anyone know what this is? Anyone guess what this might be? Well, I guess because of the nature of the live, I better tell you what it is. It's a salt cellar. And what is a salt cellar? Well, it's pretty much what you probably think it is. That's where they would store salt. And they would put this in here. And so back in those days, they wouldn't have the shaker, right? They would, have where you shake the salt on. They would put them in here, and then you would pinch it out. So you'd have it on your table, right, like this. And then you reach over, and you pinch, put it on the food, and you just sort of have it around. It's very elegant. It belonged to James Monroe. I actually have another one here. I'll show you. Where is it? There it is. It's a very distinguished look to it. There's glass on the inside. I think I can sort of move this a little bit. But if you can see, there's actually, it actually does come out. It's blown glass. See that? I don't think this is crystal. I think this is just regular blown glass, but I may be mistaken. I don't think so. And like I said, the difference between crystal and regular glass is the lead content. I don't think it is, but put this back in, colored glass. Very simple, very, very simple. So this is an interesting thing because this is an example of an artifact that both exists now and doesn't exist now. And what I mean by that is it exists in the sense that we have salt shakers and ways to dispense salt the same, but we don't usually pinch it and bring it out. So in that sense, it doesn't win. Yeah, right, Honor? Exactly. We've all been pinching it wrong, so that's what that is. This is sterling silver, which means it has 72 or 92.5% silver in it. And then blown glass, so it's just kind of a cool thing. Anyway, all right, so that's what I had to show you today. It's pretty cool, and I'm going to review for folks that are going in. Once again, it's a whale oil lamp that belonged to James Monroe. It has the bulb here, the reservoir as they call it, and it has a nice sort of spindled down holder up here, and then the cap comes off. And inside, there's the wick and the wick stem. And like I said before, the wick stem goes down into oil because the whale oil was a little bit thicker, and the thick stem would keep it heated a little bit and keep it sort of fluid and draw up the oil up through. And a lot of times these would have two on the end, but this one just has one, a single one. A very elegant but refined piece, just like I said before, just like James Monroe, his particular style, made out of cast brass. And this is an example of an artifact that you're probably not going to see ever made again. So this is gone in history. And all things considered, that's probably a good thing if the whaling industry's gone, but whatever. This is been passed down to the family through generations, and it's actually still pretty good shape. Very interesting artifact gone with the wind. Okay, let's see. And then, once again, I'll just quickly show you the court suit, Napoleon. Like I was saying before, he has the cut steel buttons on there, which I just find amazing and fascinating. And this is made out of silk velvet, and this is something like I could totally see a goth community wearing this thing. I mean, it's beautiful. It's really refined. And then finally, let me show you once again